Okay, here we are. Ed,
Hi.
welcome to Peace One Day and AI to Peace. Thank you so much for being here. We've had some fascinating conversations today, and I know you're going to contribute even more to, I think, one of our penultimate sessions, or if not our final session
I think
today.
the final session today.
Yeah, and so you're the Head of Transformation and Innovation at Adobe. AI is obviously very important to Adobe. What are the big conversations that are happening within your organization and in the market as you see it?
I think there are three big areas that we get talked about. We talk a lot about with our customers and with the general public. One is around generative AI, and particularly about content creation and the intersection between content creation and artist creation as well. Our tools serve a lot of artists, creators creating content constantly day in, day out. So how does generative AI disrupt that, and how we can protect and monetize and help the artists, the creative people against it? And then you have the flip side from the content creation into how do you authenticate content? How actually determine whether something with our tools is authentic or not? Has it been used for nefarious purposes? Has somebody doctored it, photoshopped it, to use one of our verbs,
right,
to create misinformation in the world? So that authenticity of content, and how do you generate new content in a safe, ethical environment, I think are the two biggest areas that we're talking about currently.
I love that Photoshop is now a verb. I'm an avid user of Photoshop myself, and a keen photographer, both stills and drones. Yeah, so I think, I've not really thought about that before, but if you're an artist, then having your digital imagery and video imagery protected and authenticated and almost watermarked to say that it's yours and that it can't be corrupted by a third party must be incredibly important.
Incredibly important, because if you live your life and your work and your money and who you are is about your creativity, your style, to have someone being able to fraudulently create it, it's hugely worrying. You can look around, and it's not for the hugely successful people. There are any amount of people who will copy Banks's work and display it, and we're not sure who even know who he is. But for lesser known artists, people who are at the edge, who haven't made a huge amount of money, that's where there's a real struggle and a real worry.
Right.
But there are tools that are being developed to help protect and actually help people create, just like stock photography did. Stock photography, a lot of people think that would destroy photographers' income. In actual reality, that's helped a lot of photographers now become better known and actually get money from their own photography.
Yeah, I guess stock photography is analogous to Spotify for musicians, right?
Yes.
It gives a much broader platform on a global basis. And today is the 21st of April, and so it's Global Innovation and Creativity Day. So hopefully everybody at Adobe is partying today because it's Creativity Day, and that's what you do, right? So, but what do you think why is a day like this so important generally, but specifically as it relates to AI, our conversation for today?
So creativity is the heart of humanity. When you think about human race, we determine our humanity around creativity, around the arts, around the culture. And it's really interesting. NASA did a study that showed that at 5 years old, 95% of 5-year-olds have a high level of creativity. You get to my age, and it's now 5% have a high level of creativity. So we lose that creativity, which means our critical thought is much diminished. And you look at the way that we consume news, the older you get, the more accepting of the news and less challenging. And actually, in life and society, we need to be more critical, we need to be more creative. And if we're going to survive as a human race, we need to constantly strive for greater creativity all the way through the schools and through later life.
It's a horrible thought that your creativity is exhausted when you're at the tender age of 21. You're so young. Question for you. So what is the most important consideration for the development of AI in a constructive way for humanity? Obviously, we've talked today about creativity and the arts and digital rights, but perhaps on a broader spectrum, what do you think the big considerations for AI and humanity are?
I think starting AI from an ethical frame point is hugely important. You can't just start creating artificial intelligence and hope that it's okay. You also have to empty your mind from bias. You have to think in a very different way. The internet, the world is full of bias all around us, and it's very easy to transfer that bias into what artificial intelligence you create. So even if you have highly ethical, you can have a highly biased piece of artificial intelligence. And I think that's the real key, and that's now where people are thinking and looking at.
Yeah, and I think we've already, unfortunately, started to see that, right? There are biases, as we know, to the global north. There are some biases towards white males, you know, and so it's really important. I agree with you that we take active control of that, and we start to iron out some of those challenges as we move forward. So you've had an extensive career in the tech industry, even though you're only 21. In terms of social impact, what's the most inspiring use of technology that you've seen?
So I think it's where people come together around technology for greater good and use that technology as a platform facilitation. There's so many amazing examples. You look at the work that the International Red Cross did around, they created Unreal, a Fortnite tournament where you had to demine instead of blow people up. So you had to go around clearing mines. You look at the way that people come together to map out disaster zones through software to map out the routes so that aid organisations can go in. There's so many incredible, heartwarming stories, and I think that's the nicest thing about artificial intelligence technology. It's a chance for not data scientists, but everyone else to come together to help humanity. My daughter recently was spotting penguin chicks and hatchlings within imagery and photos as part of a scientific community. So all that adds back. You don't necessarily have to have a PhD in neuroscience and artificial intelligence to help with AI and humanity.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Who'd have known that there are penguins in Clapham, by the way?
It's surprising what you find on the comment.
Yeah, or maybe there was a webcam somewhere in the South Pole. Perhaps that's more likely. We've talked about AI in humanity's survival, and I think one of the previous speakers talked about, look, we have an option to cease, we have an option to control, or there is an option for catastrophe. I mean, it almost isn't fathomable to think about the final one of those. But what's your view about some of the risks that are associated with AI?
I think the risks around AI is believing what we see in AI creating a false reality. I think that is the biggest harm that AI could do. You look at some of the fun, trivial things, the Lost Oasis tapes that just came out, the Sony photograph that just came out, that one that's generated by AI. These are trivial examples to highlight the power, but it's how we use that power responsibly, just like with any new technology that comes along, and the frameworks you build in to make sure that we understand what is real and what's not. Yeah,
actually, before, in the pre-discussion that you and I had, I was actually really encouraged by some of the work that you're doing to authenticate the provenance of images and videography, because you could see that images could be used for malicious purposes, right? You could imagine somebody being placed in a criminal situation where they have no alibi and actually they weren't there at all. So the fact that these digital files are being stamped and authenticated is really important work, I think.
And that content authenticity initiative goes through not just Adobe, it's an open standard, but from the Wall Street Journal through to camera manufacturers. So as someone's shooting video footage in the Ukraine, it can be authenticated as authentic. You might not want to give your GPS coordinates away, but you can verify that it's a bona fide journalist taking this within a certain area. And that ability then to see how it's been transformed through our tools and other people's tools, what's been added to it, unravel the onion layers to make sure that you know the provenance.
So that's interesting. So you're therefore talking about the authentication from the journalist through the hardware into the image and through the publication of that image into its eventual position, effectively authenticating throughout that value chain to make sure that at source it's a genuine piece of.
And that you can then determine, you can apply critical thought to what that image is, rather than taking at face value that it's snowing in the pyramids. Trivial example, there's much worse, but you can actually say, no, you can see that the snow has been put on top of the pyramid.
Yeah, this is actually really reassuring, I think, because I think one of the big challenges that you could see with kind of deep fake technology and photorealism is that in malicious hands you could be placed in all sorts of scenarios that aren't real, right?
Yes, and
across all facets of life too, right?
And people in power can be given the voice for anonymous statements to harm and create misinformation, mischief and violence. And actually that ability to apply authenticity is going to be, I think, one of the next big areas for humanity to solve.
Yeah, we can't underestimate the power of this, actually, because, you know, when we think about, you know, some of the harm that has been done already through some of the social media platforms. I remember back to the Arab Spring, where you know where there was big social unrest, you know, because of the power of technology. The fact that you can the fact that you can safeguard this so that people are protected, I think, is really important. For people that are new to this type of technology, or perhaps just starting their career, or perhaps in the middle of their career and wanting to just get more involved, what advice would you give them so that they can immerse themselves in the world of AI?
I think you don't have to be a data scientist as the number one. Don't be put off by artificial intelligence and algorithms and the thought of getting into all of that. Unless you've got a certain way of thinking, all of the data science is actually quite tricky. But what we're coming to is now the productization of artificial intelligence. We will have supercomputers in our pockets. That's coming, that you have AI in your pocket that we'll be able to use for greater good. The interesting thing is applying creativity back to and innovation, back to that theme of the today, into using it in new and different ways. It's not the ways that you or I here might think about it. It's the ways that somebody sat at home goes, what if we could solve pollution through doing this? What if we could solve violence against women through doing this? All those ways are ways that actually have an idea, look for a technical community, look for artificial people who can help bring that to light. So creativity, innovation, don't stop creating.
Yeah, and I think there are two aspects that, you know, two words really popped out for me. One was creativity, because I think that is the essence of humanity. I agree with you. And the second is community, right? So creativity and community, everybody working together to foster this new possibility that can be afforded through AI. I think I've got one more question. We've got a couple of minutes left. Reading material, podcasts, communities, online forums, people of interest, books, whatever it might be. What advice would you give in that regard? Where would people go? Where have you taken inspiration?
I think I take greatest innovation and thoughts from the community aspect. It's what people are doing. It's the human element that interests me more. It's whether people are looking at how do you analyze CCTV footage in high schools in the States for people carrying guns.
Right.
For wildfires, how do you spot that and raise alarms? All those sort of applications and the communities coming together to foster that is where I'd start searching those news stories. Yes, and then dig deeper into actually how those are happening, how those are coming about. And that might inspire you to create your own AI for good.
Yeah, I think a couple of people have said that right today. So almost detach yourself from tech for tech's sake and really think deeply about the use cases. And if you immerse yourself in the use cases, you're probably going to find one that you're particularly interested in, and that's going to inspire you to dig deeper and get more involved.
And I think the other side is AI can help you communicate better, whether it's through ChatGPT actually helping you become a better communicator, whether it's about generative AI helping, giving inspiring creativity. We look at Firefly, our new generative AI tool. You look at the ways that can inspire you. I've used it constantly at the moment to inspire my thinking of new ways of creating content, ways that you wouldn't normally think. It's a disruptor for that creative thought process. So keep being creative, experimenting, learn, play with the tools.
Yeah. And do you think AI will be harnessed for the extrapolation of content? I mean, we talked earlier on about Spotify being, you know, a technology that effectively democratizes music and makes it available to everybody. Do you think that AI will help with that, or is that not an area that you're particularly thinking about?
I think content, again, will be handed back into the hands of people to go and create new, exciting content that we haven't thought about. You've seen that all the way through. Photoshop's a very good example of where you took professional photography into the hands of the individual at home. And that spawned website design through Photoshop. Again, taking the hands from huge amounts of talented individuals into home use. generative AI is going to do exactly the same. It's going to inspire a whole new amount of content creators in new and exciting ways we've not even thought about.
Do you know what? It's a great way to finish the show, actually, because I mean, you said at the beginning of this interview that creativity is at the heart of humanity. I think that presents a huge amount of hope for us all, actually. If we stay creative and we stay positive, I think that the outlooks for all of us will be good.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, Ed. I really appreciate your time today.
Pleasure.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.